Getting interested in your neuroscience can actually change your life. And I know when I first learned about how alcohol affected my neurochemistry, that was the moment that I had so many ahas about how I wanted to feel. You see, I never considered myself a clinically depressed person. I was pretty optimistic, even as a drinker. And yet, I couldn't come to terms with why I felt so depressed every morning after I drank, especially Monday mornings. I didn't recognize how much alcohol was affecting my neurochemistry, that it was actually lowering my levels of serotonin and GABA and my receptivity to dopamine. And as it was doing that, as it was lowering my happiness neurotransmitters, it was actually creating more receptors in my brain for what's called dynorphin. Dynorphin is almost like the opposite of endorphins, and it's really, really a neurotransmitter that makes us feel sad and low and miserable. In fact, they have studies showing that people who are suicidal and commit suicide have high levels of dynorphin in their brain. Alcohol releases this. Not only does it release it when we drink, but drinking over time increases the amount of dynorphin receptors we have in our brains. That means if you feel low or apathetic or slightly depressed or just out of it after drinking, it's not you. It's literally the science of how alcohol works on your brain. The neuroscience behind all this was so fascinating to me because it took so much pressure off me to realize I'm not alone, this isn't me, and this is really just the fault of alcohol. Not only does alcohol lower your levels of GABA, serotonin, and your receptivity to dopamine, as it's cranking up this bad neurotransmitter called dynorphin, it also increases your levels of cortisol and adrenaline, which then make you feel on edge and have a lot of anxiety and stress. Isn't it a paradox that most of us were drinking in the first place to relax, and yet alcohol was literally actually creating way more stress in our bodies? There's this saying, right? Like, I'm on edge. I need a drink to like get off edge, right? But isn't it the paradox that the only reason why someone is on edge in the first place is because the drink that they had before, even a week before, is still creating that response in their body? You know, when you take a long break from alcohol, I've heard from many people that when you have a drink again after, months and months without alcohol, it just doesn't feel that great because it's really not relieving the symptoms that alcohol created in the first place. And so, as you take a break from alcohol, as your brain chemistry rebalances, you start to feel your natural moods coming up for you again. And remember, when we drink, we also get this very artificial spike of dopamine in our brains. And this artificial spike of dopamine in our brains from alcohol is super similar to how other drugs elicit it in our brain as well, like cocaine or heroin. And it's such an artificially high spike that it actually doesn't really compare with that much that we experience in nature. And what ends up happening over time with tolerance is that these artificial spikes of dopamine become the only thing our brain looks forward to. Meaning that everything else that's supposed to make you feel happy, everything else that's supposed to make you feel joyful in this world doesn't really register on your brain anymore. You literally become apathetic to the joys of life. What do I mean by that? I mean, what are some just like pure, natural, organic joys that we have here on life? Maybe it's playing with a child. Maybe it's like cuddling with your dog. Maybe it's having a belly laugh with your friend. Maybe it's feeling super, super in awe by seeing a gorgeous starlit sky. Maybe it's, enjoying an ice cream or being in the woods or something like that. These natural pleasures of life don't register on our brain so much when alcohol is always hijacking our dopamine response, literally making us numb to the joys of life. When you drink to numb the stressful or the uncomfortable feelings, you always have to remember, you're not just numbing the bad, you're also numbing the good. And it can be a really eye-opening experience to remove alcohol from your life for an extended break to really see, what is my neurochemistry rebalanced to? How do I naturally feel? I felt so giddy when my brain chemistry rebalanced. It almost felt like I was falling in love. I remember being like singing songs in my car, just like really joyfully. I remember dancing with my dog. I remember like staring at clouds and looking at trees and just being super, super mesmerized by the world around me. It was like I had been asleep or had tunnel vision this whole time, and all of a sudden, when I took those blinders off, I could really see the world for all of its grandeur and all of its beauty. And today, I want to talk a little bit about how we can continue to elicit positive neurotransmitters in our brain. Because in a way, we can almost biohack our happiness. Happiness is no accident. Happiness is not the result of of just being lucky or, having a certain kind of disposition in your life or your circumstances. In fact, most studies prove the very opposite. Like, there are people who are living in what we would think of as extreme poverty, but are connected with their families and live, with the earth, in different countries, and they feel fabulously happy. And then there are people who have everything, right? And they're miserable. So happiness is really not a chance or a lucky state that we happen to be in. We control our happiness. We control our happiness by doing the things that bring us joy. We control our happiness by taking care of our mental well-being. We take care of our happiness by expressing all of our feelings, right? Not just the positive ones, but also the negative ones. We have to cry sometimes. We have to let out steam. We have to let it out. And so I'm going to talk today quickly about the 4 neurotransmitters that you can kind of biohack a little bit to elicit your own happiness a little bit more. So the first one we're going to talk about today is dopamine. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is probably the most affected by alcohol. That is what alcohol is stimulating in your brain. That is why you want another drink. That is why you're craving a drink in the first place, because that buzz of feeling is really the release of dopamine in your brain. For a long time, we thought that dopamine was a happiness neurotransmitter until we really discovered more that it actually affects learning and motivation and wanting. So dopamine is really, really highly involved in any of your habits and really completing the loop on your habits, because when we find that something is important to our survival, our brain also releases glutamate to lock in that learning. Like when a hunter-gatherer found a piece of fruit and ate it and got a sugar rush, the brain was like, this is important. We need this fruit to survive. So it locked in that learning. And so dopamine is also really, really highly implicated, not in just the things that make you happy or feel good in a moment, but things that make you learn, things that make you grow, things that make you feel wonder and awe and appreciation. So dopamine, in a sense, could really be tied to your sense of challenge, adventure, and completion of goals. So how can you biohack this in your life? Well, first of all, let's go with the first one, adventure. How can you feel more wonder in your life? How can you really experience the beauty of the world? This is the neurotransmitter that gets affected when you see a beautiful waterfall. This is the dopamine, the neurotransmitter that gets affected when you see the stars and that you're just mesmerized by the sky. This is literally seeing things in the world that bring you awe and bring you happiness in that moment and letting yourself really appreciate them. Adventure could also mean like watching, doing things, right? Like doing new adventurous stuff that you've never wanted to try. I remember when I was in my first few months alcohol-free, all of a sudden I had so much time and energy and really confidence to go after things I always wanted to try. And I started doing things that were completely out of my comfort zone. I remember going to Zumba classes and paddleboard yoga and going to writing classes and just doing all these fun different things, like riding my bike on the coastline that I just wouldn't have done before, right? So adventure and doing new things is super important. And students in Become Euphoric have an entire week in week 7 to really list out the things that they've always wanted to try, like a bucket list. And I've had clients do things like boxing and aerial yoga and take French lessons and go to dancing classes and start drawing again and start knitting, like all this just insane stuff that like most of us don't regularly do that they start doing. So adventure there. Dopamine also is released when we are learning something. We're challenged to do something. So this is the thing. So many times people ask me, like, what do I do if I'm not going to drink? Like, I'm bored. Your brain is craving stimulation, and it's not the kind of stimulation that comes from being a super passive zombie and drinking and letting fireworks up in there. It comes from you being an active agent in your own life. And so learning and challenge is also where dopamine's released. So learning and challenge could be like finding something that you think is perplexing and learning how to do it. For example, launching a business, right? Most people have no idea how to launch a business. How do you start a website? How do you pay for your taxes? How do you, So for me, launching my own business was a huge way that I was able to tap into releasing dopamine on a regular basis, because I'm always today, every day, I'm always learning more. I'm always learning more. I'm always challenging myself and accomplishing things I never knew how to do before. Maybe it's like launching a website for you, or launching a podcast, or learning how to code, or learning a new language, or, learning how to garden or cook something different or refurbish furniture. It could be any number of things. But we have psychologists that tell us when we get into flow is the state that we get into when we're like learning and we're mesmerized with something and our brain is trying to solve something and we're perplexed about it and we're also kind of good at it. Like, this is one of the most beautiful states that you can get into, when literally time passes you by because you're in such a beautiful state of flow. You're so mesmerized by what you're doing. So if you ever feel bored because you're not drinking, you need to know, like, there is a world of things for you to do and learn, and your brain's actually craving that kind of stimulation. So think of a few ideas you could do there. And the last thing around dopamine that gets released when it gets released is when we complete our goals. And when we complete our goals, obviously could be really big goals that we have and juicy, like life dream stuff, but it could also be really, really small stuff. So did you know that your brain releases dopamine when you check something off a list? So it doesn't even have to be like a crazy to-do list from work. It could literally be the fact that you didn't drink that day. I like to mark in the morning. I still do it because, heck, I love that dopamine rush. I check off I didn't drink in the morning. I do checks for a lot of things in my life. I do checks for drinking a green smoothie or my breath work or my meditation. I have all these lists that I do in my life because our brain loves it when we complete a goal. And really celebrating the small stuff is how you prepare your brain to want to have more wins in its life. So did you meditate that day? Make some kind of check mark somewhere and give yourself a gold star. Did you eat fairly healthy? Did you work out? Did you do your gratitude journaling? Did you even just drink a glass of water when you woke up? Do a check mark. Every day in Become Euphoric, students have what's called the daily 3. Where all they have to do is drink a glass of water, list 3 things that they're grateful for, and say 1 affirmation. And by doing this, they check off 3 different boxes and already can feel accomplished for the day before anything else even happens. So small wins are super, super important to really, really give yourself that hint of dopamine and want your brain to start chasing more of it so that, yeah, maybe it's a small win. Maybe it's just like, I just drank a glass of water when I normally didn't, but then your brain wants more of it. So then you start accomplishing even bigger goals for yourself. So that's dopamine. The second happiness neurotransmitter I'm going to talk about today is serotonin. And serotonin really affects our feelings of calm and relaxation. And like I said, drinking lowers your levels of serotonin over time. So it's, again, the ultimate paradox that we drink to relax, but we're really robbing ourselves of the actual neurotransmitter that relaxes us. So serotonin is elicited when you feel calm and peace and in love with yourself. So it's doing those very meditative, mindful, sensual kind of practices where you're just with you. So you release serotonin when you do something comforting and nurturing for yourself. Not something unhealthy for yourself like drinking, but something truly comforting and nurturing. So some ideas for this could be meditating. Some ideas could be journaling. You could be taking a bath. You could be making a nice cup of tea. You could watch your favorite holiday movie. You could get really good nurturing food. You could do brushing your skin. You could light a candle. You could have a gratitude journaling practice. So these are just moments where you have a little bit of solitude. Think about it like that, like a moment of solitude for yourself. And it's just a little moment for you that you give something nice. So serotonin's elicited when you feel calm, when you feel relaxed, when you're doing activities that promote that. So do some yin yoga. That's such an easy way to release serotonin in your life. Yin yoga is easy, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know if it's easy, but it's not so strenuous. You just sit there in poses and allow your body to stretch over gravity, and it feels great. I love how it feels. So put on like a yin yoga video. Sometimes I'll just do like a quick 5-minute yin practice, and I feel amazing afterwards. So things like that elicit serotonin in your life. The next neurotransmitter we're going to talk about is endorphins. Endorphins are released when we move our body. So endorphins can be released obviously from working out and going on a long run or any run or doing your workout. But remember, you don't always have to work out and put on a formal workout gear in your sports bra to elicit endorphins. You can elicit endorphins just by doing little things in your day and making yourself feel happier from it. So for example, when I'm preparing my coffee in the morning or tea, I'll play some music and dance. I have one of those like small trampolines, and I will jump. If I have like 3 minutes and I'm waiting for the microwave to beep or just something else is going on, I will just jump to music, and it completely releases those endorphins. When I am celebrating a win, even if it's a small win or a big win, I will literally put on music and dance it out for at least 2 minutes, right? So I can release endorphins in my life. It doesn't have to be my boot camp workout. It doesn't have to be anything strenuous. It literally can be these little moments of your day that you release it. And, you know, like with endorphins, you can release it as well as like just not only just dancing in your life, but it could be like just racing your heart rate for 30 seconds. You know, like you could stand there and do jumping jacks for 30 seconds and release the endorphins in your life, and it feels really, really good. I'm glad Katie's here. She loves these biohacks, so you can pull from. Yeah, these are great ideas to pull from any time. And a lot of times these 4 neurotransmitters that I'm talking about can be also really deeply tied to our core human needs. And so what happens is we get so mixed up with alcohol. We think that alcohol is meeting some of our core needs. And I could do a whole video just on our core human needs. But we end up misguidedly believing that, and it really almost doesn't really meet those needs very well. That's why it's not sustainable and very fulfilling over the long run. So if we can be creative about how to meet our needs in new ways, we actually fulfill our buckets, we feel full, we're not drained, we're energized from it, we're happier from it, and there's really like a new sense of joy and happiness that happens. So moving your body with endorphins. And the 4th neurotransmitter I'm talking about today is oxytocin. Oxytocin is what's known as the love neurotransmitter, and we feel it when we feel connected with other people. It's most famously known as the neurotransmitter that really takes over a woman's brain when she delivers a baby, right? So she delivers a baby, the baby comes out, they put her on the chest, and oxytocin is flooding her neurochemical and hormonal system. So oxytocin is released when we are close in the presence of our loved ones. They have studies that show if you just give someone a hug for 20 seconds, you will both release oxytocin. So oxytocin can be released, like I said. I know right now we have COVID and it might be hard to be with all of our loved ones, but even scheduling a Zoom call with one of your grandparents could be a great way to, you know, really touch into that oxytocin. Maybe calling your parents, maybe scheduling a date with your partner, or, you know, a coffee date with your friend. And actually, like if you're partnered up, you know, like stopping at the end of the day or the beginning of the day and just giving your partner a hug for 20 seconds is enough to release this neurotransmitter. Another way to do it too is, you don't always have to be in company with people you love. There's these incredible meditations that come from the Buddhist tradition that really ask us to start sending love and light to other people. And oftentimes I will do a meditation where I'm sending like light to people and actually watching them receive it and become filled and smiling. So I will, like, my grandma just passed away recently, and it's been obviously really hard on my dad, who's her son, and his sister. And so I just picture this light that I'm sending from my heart into my dad's heart, and I see him light up and smile because of it. And then I send it to my aunt, and I see her light up and smile because of it. I send it to my mom and my sister and my clients. I send them to my students. I send it to everyone I know and love, all of you, when I think of it. And that will light me up so much, right? Because it's actually releasing the oxytocin in my brain. So that's like an even really simple, easy one. You don't even have to find someone to talk to or hug. You can literally just do like a heart-loving meditation where you're sending love and light, and you're really sending joy to other people. So those are the 4 happiness neurotransmitters that we're talking about today. Honestly, the brain is such a complicated thing, and I'm not a neuroscientist, so there's a lot of nuanced things going on. But I think those are the very easy ones to understand. And just remembering that alcohol is always lowering those happiness neurotransmitters and pumping up the negative ones. It's pumping up your cortisol, your adrenaline, and dynorphin, which I mentioned is literally the chemical that's found with people who are suicidal. So if you feel low or down after drinking, it's not you, it's the drink that's making that. So it's so interesting. It's such a paradox that a lot of us think that we're drinking because it makes us happy, and yet alcohol is like scientifically depressing us, right? It's scientifically changing the neurochemical state of our brain to feel low, depressed, and apathetic. And so when you take a break, and especially when you cross like 3, 4, 5 weeks alcohol-free, this really starts to completely, I mean, it's been rebalancing the whole time, but it really starts to show up. You really start to feel a difference in your moods. You wake up feeling euphoric. That's why everything's called euphoric here, because it's really a great way to live. And again, it's not just an accident either. You have to be intentional about finding gratitude and doing things that make you happy and getting yourself the flowers and just doing beautiful things in your life. So if you have any other questions about how to really be intentional about your happiness, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them next time. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you. Thank you, Tiffany, Katie, and Ned for joining live today. I appreciate you all, and I'm sending you my heart-loving love right now. I can picture all of you and just send it out right there to anyone who's watching the replay. I appreciate you all so much, and I'll see you next week.